My name is Marion Carter. I was 67 when my only son decided I was no longer worth the space I took up in the world. He didn't say it outright, of course. Ethan always had a way of dressing cruelty up in concern. "Mama, we just want what's best for you," he said that night, his wife Danielle nodding beside him, like it was a line they'd rehearsed in the car. They brought soup. They smiled too much. They asked about old paperwork I hadn't touched in years, and told me how hard it must be keeping up a house at my age. I didn't realize they'd already spoken to a lawyer. I didn't know Danielle had started changing the locks. But what I remember most is that lunch. They picked me up on a Sunday. Danielle wore pearls. Ethan wore that fake smile he always used when he was lying. "We're taking you out," he said. "Just us three. You need a break." I didn't pack a bag. I didn't even wear my good shoes. We drove for half an hour. Then they pulled up in front of a beige building with a fake fountain and plastic tulips lining the sidewalk. "Just for a few days," Ethan said. He kissed my cheek and held me a little too long. Danielle smiled with her cold, glossy lips and walked me to the entrance, like a guest being dropped off at a hotel. But it wasn't a hotel. It was a nursing facility, one of those memory care places with locked doors and no clocks. They left me there without my phone, without my purse, without a clue. I asked the nurse if I could call my son. "You'll have to wait until visiting hours," she said, not unkindly. "But he just left." She looked confused, and then she handed me the paperwork signed by Ethan. Power of attorney, medical consent, long-term placement. He'd signed me away like a suitcase. And that's when I realized I wasn't confused. I wasn't dying. I was being erased. The room was bare, no calendar, no photos, just a twin bed, a narrow dresser, and beige walls that felt like silence. I sat on the edge of that bed for hours, hands folded in my lap like I was in church. I wasn't crying. I wasn't yelling. I was processing. And what I processed was this. My only child had locked me away and walked into my house like I'd already died. The next morning, I asked the front desk if I could speak with the administrator. A younger woman in a navy pantsuit led me into a small office with a plant that was definitely fake. "There must be a mistake," I told her calmly. "I'm not confused. I'm not dying. I live alone, yes, but I'm capable." She blinked slowly, like I was speaking a foreign language. "Your son said you've been having spells," she replied. "He indicated this was a long-term placement for your safety." I wanted to scream, I really did. But something deep in me said, don't. Screaming would only prove them right. So I didn't. Instead, I waited. For 3 days, I waited in that little room, staring out at a courtyard full of people who didn't know their own names. People who'd once been teachers, mothers, musicians, accountants, and now they just sat. Some drooled, some muttered, some stared at nothing. And I thought, is this how I end? After everything I did, after everything I held back so Ethan could have a future. That night, I asked the night nurse for a notebook. I told her I liked to journal. She smiled and brought me one from the activity closet spiral-bound. Cheap, but it would do. But I didn't write poems or prayers. I wrote facts, dates, transactions, property deeds, bank accounts, passwords, every contact I still remembered. And at the top of the first page, I wrote one name, Monica Harris, my old attorney. I hadn't spoken to her in 2 years, but I never took her out of my contacts. Because somewhere in me, I always knew I might need her again. It took 4 days to get access to a phone. When I finally did, I called Monica's office. The line rang 6 times before I heard the voicemail. "This is Monica Harris. Please leave a message." I didn't waste time. "Monica, it's Marion Carter. My son has committed fraud. He forged my consent and placed me in a care facility against my will. I still have access to our joint account and the deed to my home. Call me." She called back before lunch. "Ms. Carter?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Are you safe?" "As safe as a woman can be when her only child locks her away and thinks she won't bite back," I replied. There was silence. Then she said, Tell me everything." By Friday, Monica was standing at the front desk of the facility, briefcase in hand, and storm in her voice. She told the nurse she was my attorney. Suddenly, everyone was nervous. The administrator pulled her aside, trying to explain how they were acting in the client's best interest. Monica didn't flinch. She came into my room, looked me square in the eye, and said, "You're not staying here another week. And if they give us trouble, we sue them too." I could have cried. Instead, I handed her the notebook. Inside were pages of evidence, my full mental history, the doctor's name who had cleared me 6 months ago, the last utility bill still in my name, the notarized deed that listed me as sole owner of the house Ethan had moved into. "He thinks you forgot," Monica said, flipping through the pages. "Let's remind him. First, we filed an emergency petition to revoke the forged power of attorney. Next, we obtained an independent capacity assessment from the facility's own doctor. He told me quietly on day 2, 'You don't belong here.' Then came the kicker: we froze the joint account Ethan had been using to pay his mortgage. He thought I was helpless, but I had more power in my silence than he ever had in his schemes. By Wednesday afternoon, I walked out the front door of that nursing home. No goodbyes. Just a slow, steady walk into freedom carried not by hope, but by strategy. We didn't go back to my house. I didn't want to. Monica booked us into a quiet suite at an extended stay hotel for the weekend while we planned the next step. She brought me a soft cardigan and a fresh pair of shoes. No one looked twice at us. Just 2 women, one getting her life back, the other making sure no one took it again. Ethan didn't know I was out yet, but he would. That weekend, Monica filed a petition to enforce a partition sale. Ethan was living in a home he had no legal right to occupy. He hadn't bought it. He hadn't inherited it. He hadn't even been granted permission. And I wasn't going to fight him for keys. I was going to sell the whole damn house. And I did. A young couple newly married, no kids yet, walked through it with wide eyes and soft hands. They loved the arched hallway, the garden I had once built with Ethan when he was 8, the old wood floors. "I think it wants to be filled with love again," the wife whispered, fingers brushing the kitchen counter. I nodded. "It does." They paid in full, cash. We closed in just under 2 weeks. The house I once scrubbed on my knees now belonged to someone who saw it as a beginning, not a conquest. Danielle messaged me on Facebook after they got the court order to vacate. "Your family," she wrote. "This was our future." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, "No, I was your past, and you buried me too early." Then I blocked her. But the day they moved out, Danielle didn't speak to Ethan. She loaded the car in silence, slammed the trunk, and drove off without looking back. Ethan sat on the porch for hours that night, just him and the dark. But I wasn't done. 3 days later, I bought the house next door, a small 1-story place with rose bushes out front and a porch that faced Ethan's kitchen window. I paid in full, no mortgage, just paperwork, keys, and a pen that shook slightly in my hand, not from weakness, but from the quiet satisfaction of what I had just done. I didn't tell anyone, not even Tyler, because this was mine. The first morning in my new home, I wore my best Sunday hat and sat on the front steps with a cup of sweet tea. I didn't wave. I didn't speak. I just existed, calm, quiet, undeniable. And then Ethan stepped outside. He was in gym shorts and a wrinkled t-shirt, holding a trash bag in one hand and his phone in the other. He looked tired, not just sleep-deprived, but worn in a way that happens when the foundation under your feet begins to crack. He saw me and froze. I smiled just enough to register. He turned around and went straight back inside. 4 days later, Danielle stopped making eye contact. She parked on the far side of the driveway, closed the blinds tighter. I noticed, but I didn't react. Instead, I planted roses, bright, blood-red ones along the shared fence. "Petty," Monica teased. I smiled. Peaceful warfare. Every morning, I waved to the mailman. I baked banana bread for the young couple, who now lived in my old house. I chatted with neighbors Ethan never bothered to speak to, and every evening, I sat with my tea, watching Ethan through the blinds as he tried not to look back. Then, one afternoon, Tyler appeared. He walked up slowly, his backpack slung low, shoulders heavy. He paused at the fence, then crossed. He knocked once. I opened the screen door. "Grandma," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "can I sit with you a while?" I didn't ask questions, I just moved aside. We sat in silence for a bit, just like we used to during summer storms when he was little and afraid of the thunder. I poured him iced tea in a glass with a lemon wedge. He took it, held it, didn't drink. "They told me you had dementia," he finally said. "Said you weren't safe alone." I gave him a soft smile. "I never was confused," I said gently. He looked at me for a long time, then asked, "Why'd you buy the house next door?" I turned to face him fully. "Because your father needed a reminder," I said. One he could see every time he stepped outside. Tyler stared at me, then snorted. "You're colder than I thought, Grandma." I laughed, a real one. "No, baby, I'm just done pretending I owe anyone my silence." The next morning, Ethan showed up on my porch. He didn't knock right away, just stood there with his cap in his hand, like a boy rehearsing a lie. I didn't move. I sat in my chair, calm as ever, tea in hand. Finally, he knocked. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. I sipped my tea. "Doing what?" "Living here, across the street, watching us." I tilted my head. "I bought this house because I like the view. You're trying to humiliate me." I set my tea down. "No, Ethan, that part already happened. You did that when you called me a burden." He looked away. I kept going. "I raised you alone, worked 3 jobs, skipped meals. I kept the lights on when I couldn't afford the gas bill, and when I finally needed help just a little, you left me in a locked room with strangers, called it mercy, called it love." I thought. "No," I cut in. "You didn't think, you acted, you forged, you lied, and you assumed I wouldn't fight back." He had no words. I stood slowly and walked to the door. "This is my peace, Ethan," I said firmly. "Don't knock unless you plan to earn your way back into it." Then I closed the door. No slamming, no dramatics, just the quiet click of a woman reclaiming her dignity. That night, Tyler came downstairs while I was setting the table for dinner. "Was that Dad?" he asked. I nodded. "What did he say?" "Nothing I hadn't already heard in my heart," I answered. "But it's not my job to carry him anymore." Tyler sat at the table across from me. For a moment, he just stared at his plate. Then he said softly, "I'm glad you're my grandma." I smiled, warm and full. "Me too, baby, me too." Outside, Ethan sat on his own porch, alone again. And I let him. Because peace, once reclaimed, is not something you ever surrender again. People think closure comes when someone says sorry. I don't believe that. I believe closure comes when you can look at someone's face and feel nothing. No more ache, no more need. Just space between you and the storm. And I had finally stepped out of the storm. A month later, I received a certified letter from Monica. Inside was the final draft of my will, neatly typed, fully notarized, and updated to reflect exactly what I wanted. Ethan got nothing. Not a penny. The house I now lived in would belong to Tyler when he turned 21. Until then, a trust would cover his education, his food, his health, and anything else he needed to build a real life. The rest of my estate, every cent from the house sale, my retirement fund, and old life insurance would go towards something new: the Carter Legacy Grant, a program I helped the community center launch. It was built for women like me, older women discarded by the very children they raised, women made to feel like burdens, women with good minds, deep histories, and no one left to listen. I made the first donation myself, $50,000. No fanfare, no name on a plaque. Just quiet power put to better use. I didn't tell Ethan. He found out 2 months later when he called Monica, asking for a copy of the estate plan just to be informed. She told him with a smile that he wasn't included. That evening, my phone rang. I recognized the number. Mom? Ethan's voice was tight. Is this real? Yes? You're cutting me out completely? No, I said. You did that all by yourself years ago when you signed me away like luggage and sold my things before I was even cold. Silence. I said I was sorry, he finally muttered. And I said I forgave you, I replied. But forgiveness doesn't mean inheritance. Then I hung up. That was the last time we spoke. A month later, he moved. No U-Haul, no goodbyes, just a crooked for sale sign that sat on his lawn for 2 quiet weeks before it disappeared. The neighbors said he left town. Some say he went to Florida. Others think he moved in with a friend. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. Because the day he left, I sat on my porch with jasmine tea in hand and Tyler beside me, watching the street grow quiet again. He's gone, Tyler said. I nodded. Sometimes people leave when they realize they can't control the story anymore. Do you think he'll ever come back? Maybe, I said. But if he does, he'll find a fence that wasn't there before. Later that year, I was invited to speak at the community center's Elder Justice Seminar. They asked me to say a few words about financial abuse, power of attorney scams, and reclaiming your legal rights as you age. I stood at the podium in my navy dress, hair pinned back, and told them the truth. They will call you old, I said. They will call you a burden. They will smile while stealing the life you built. But let me tell you something. There is power in truth. There is power in silence. And there is power in the law if you're brave enough to use it. The audience clapped. A few women cried. One came up to me afterward, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me I'm not crazy." And that's what it's really about. Not just revenge, but legacy. Making sure no one gets left behind in a room that smells like bleach and pity. Making sure our stories aren't erased just because we walk a little slower or can't lift a grocery bag. That night, I went home and looked around the little house I once thought was a step down. But it wasn't smaller. It was freer, lighter, mine. Tyler was already in the kitchen, setting the table. He'd asked earlier if we could bake cookies after dinner. I smiled and told him yes, we could do anything we wanted, because no one was uprooting us again. I stepped onto the porch as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the garden. The roses I planted that spring had bloomed full and wild. The tomato vines were creeping up the fence. The marigolds danced in the evening breeze like they had secrets to keep. I looked at it, all the life I'd reclaimed, and thought, they put me in a nursing home and called me a burden. But I gave them a weight they'll never shake. Not out of hatred, out of principle. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't rage or ruin. It's peace. It's clarity. It's boundaries that don't break. And it's the sound of your own laughter in a house they thought would go quiet without them. That's the sound of justice. That's the beginning of freedom. And it starts on a porch with sweet tea, soft jazz on the radio, and a life that is finally your own.